Our 2 o'clock panel, We Talk TV, where we're going to have Gregg Berger, the voice of Grimlock and Skyfire, and Michael Charles Hill, who is a writer and producer on the Transformers Generation 1 cartoon, talk about some behind the scenes and take questions from the audience. So let's give them a warm welcome. Come on, guys. Hello. Thank you so much for being here. Michael, it's especially great to have you because this is the first time you've been out to a TF Nation. I suspect it's your first European con, is that right?
It is, yes.
So I hope you're having a great time.
Having a great time.
So let's get started with something that the audience always wants to know. How did you guys get started in the business?
For me, I don't think I won.
It's my first day in show business. My first love, my last love, and my everything in between love is stage. And I started in a theater conservatory in the Midwest. Actually, started in an Ivy League adjacent college in the East. My roommate dragged me to an audition. He said, everything you do seems to be voice-driven, stories you tell in the meal hall, dining hall. Anyway, he said they were doing an English drawing room farce, black comedy, a Joe Orton comedy. He said they're going outside the English department, outside the theater department, they'll see anybody. He dragged me. I'd never not been interested, but I was a relative newbie, and I got cast, and opening night, the head of the theater department said, what are you doing in the English department? I said, I don't know. Pre-law, or I'll teach English, or I really don't have a direction. He said, well, don't stop doing what you're doing, but he said, you're the kind of raw talent that we really would love to sort of feed and water and see which way it grows. And I kind of credit that with every good thing that's ever happened to me. I don't think that any of us at younger, wonder-bred, developmental ages should profess to determine your direction at the expense of letting your direction find you if things happen that move you in a direction, especially if it's an artistic direction. Allow it to move you and at least consider it, at least allow the opportunity for it to flourish. Maybe it will, maybe it won't, but you know, you don't want to spend your life saying you never at least gave something a chance to happen that might have happened. And then after that, it's a long odyssey, you know, with highs and lows and middles and rejection and all manner, and a skill set you have to acquire and a backup position you have to factor in. But it's your life, and my goal was to make it an adventure, and it still is. And anyway, that's the origin story. I came to play, I still come to play, I get to do what I love, and I love what I do. I'm a lucky guy.
For me, I just stumbled into animation writing. It wasn't anything I had aspired to or thought about as a career path. Prior to that, I was writing feature scripts. In fact, Flint Dilley and I were friends before we were working at Sunbow, and we had a writer's group. We'd meet every Monday night, and we'd bring in 10 pages of the script we were working on to share with everyone else. And during the day, I was working in film production, mostly TV commercials, which I think maybe you call adverts here, and doing the, well, being a writer, you're doing a Hollywood hustle too, but it was the same in film production, always looking for that next gig. And Flint's family, at the time, owned the rights to Buck Rogers, and he and his manager were shopping that around to the animation studios in town, and basically no one was interested. But one studio in particular, which was called Ruby Spears, run by two guys who became famous when they worked for Hanna-Barbera, and they created Scooby-Doo. So now they have their own studio, and they hired Flint to write for a show called Mr. T. And within a few weeks, he calls me up and he says, "Hey, how would you like to get paid for writing?" And that sounded really good to me. And so he brought me into Ruby Spears, introduced me to the story editor of a show called Dragon Slayer, which was based on a video arcade game that had a TV monitor and played animation. So it was a Saturday morning cartoon. ABC ordered 13 episodes. I ended up writing 4 and decided that I enjoyed doing that far more than I enjoyed getting up at 4:30 in the morning to be on a soundstage or on location at 6. And I decided to pursue that after that show was effectively canceled by ABC because Ruby Spears was late in delivering episodes. And within a year's time, I ended up at Sunbow working on Transformers.
Yeah, and let's talk about how you got involved with Transformers, because that kind of gets you in the door. But you went from a freelance writer to being on the production staff pretty quickly.
Yes, it surprised even me because the only thing I did after Dragon Slayer before Transformers was one episode of GoBots, which was not a fun experience for me. But Sunbow only existed on the East Coast because they were part of Griffin McCall Advertising. And they were dealing, they subcontracted everything to Marvel. And at some point, they had decided that they wanted more control, and they were going to open an LA office. So they found studio space in Westwood, which is the home of UCLA, and starting interviewing some folks. And they hired Flint, and within a couple of weeks, of my interview with them, they hired me, and they wanted somebody who had more than just an animation background, so my film production experience came into play.
Yeah, I was wondering about that.
Yeah.
And Greg, how did you get involved with Transformers?
Well, it's a continuation of the story I just told. I came to LA primarily with theater credits. I was able to, everything I did was via showcasing. So I was cast in a play, I was seen in plays. I got a theatrical agent. I was doing television and film. I was on camera, but I was always doing plays. And I was cast in the West Coast version of a play that came out from New York called Cloud 9, directed by Tommy Tune in New York, but it was restaged for the Los Angeles stage. I got cast as an understudy in that production, and I thought, oh great, nobody's going to see me. Not that that's the end goal of being an actor, it's not the end goal. And my manager said, the play's the thing, this is a beautiful play, and a great opportunity for a versatile actor, and I want you, I recommend that you do it. I did it. The night came when the actor was unable to get there. I went into adrenaline hyperdrive. 2 different people were in the audience that night. One, I had been cast by Wally Berger, the director of Transformers and G.I. Joe, in another animated show called The Littles. But it was very neutral, close to myself, playing the dad in The Littles, which I was thrilled about. But that's kind of how he saw me. He saw me in this play the same night that Gordon Hunt saw me. Gordon Hunt was doing all the voice direction at Hanna-Barbera. This night changed every day of the rest of my life. So don't tell me that opportunities don't happen, because I'm here to tell you they do. But Wally had also been in the audience that night. I went on as an understudy. He was familiar with me, but not to the degree of what he saw me do that night.
And it was a perfect storm, but I was beyond adrenalized. He said, the next time I went in for the littles, he said, between you, me, and the lamppost, I'm about to start 2 gigantic projects, one called Transformers and one called G.I. Joe. I now have a sense of you as an actor that is so much more dynamic than I was aware of, that I'm considering you for everything. Wally's casting process was that he would put out a table full of scripts and say, choose 3 that you consider yourself best for. Well, no director does that. I think it's unbelievably to his credit, and for the rest of his life. Sadly, he's no longer with us, but I would, sort of bow to him and say, you're responsible for so much of my career, not just jobs, not just gigs, but an arc that was responsible for a lifetime of work for me. And we were friends outside the studio. And Wally called me about Grimlock in particular. He said, I heard from Hasbro and Sunbow. He said, they say you're it, but there's concern as to whether you can maintain and sustain that tonsil-busting a character. And I said, put me in, coach. I'll hit it out of the park. I'll find a way to wrap my tonsils around it. And just like every heavy metal singer, just like Bon Scott, I learned how to expand my vocal cords rather than contract them. I learned how to have a career for a lifetime, not for a week. And I learned how to make a tonsil-busting voice my friend and not my enemy. And here I am, and it's still happening. And I just put all those voice cues into a chip for the RoboZen robot you just saw. And, if you feed and water it, the voice can serve you for a lifetime as it has served me. Long answer to a short question, but Bob's your uncle, and there you go.
Oh, no, that's a great answer. Thank you. Honestly, I could ask you guys questions all day, but I'd like to give the audience a chance to have some of their questions answered. So does anyone have a question, or should I keep going? Yep. In the red.
All right, I'm going to try and be loud.
Be loud, and I'll repeat.
You might have been asked this question before, but if you were a transformer and could transform, what would you like to transform into?
Yeah, so the question was...
Outside of a dinosaur.
Yeah, the question was, if you could transform into something, what would you transform into? That is a good question.
It is.
And I'm going to say no dinosaur. I'm going to make it a little hard for you.
Tesla truck would be cool.
I guess for me, it would probably be a Porsche.
Oh, okay. See, I'm thinking a TARDIS just because I'd like to be able to bit around time. What else?
It's a mashup.
Yeah. All right, we got one over there. Yep.
This question is specifically for voice acting. I've got a friend who wants to go into the industry. What would be your tips and what would be your training regime to exercise your voice and practice your voice for voice acting?
Yeah, tips for breaking into voice acting.
Very specifically, you have to focus on bringing something to the party that's not already at the party. There's nothing more common than someone who says, I can sound just like Homer Simpson. They already have Dan Castellaneta. I can sound just like... However, if you want a good head start, then think about doing a bouillabaisse. Think about a number of voices that you have a propensity to sound like, and put them in the pot and mix them together and hybridize and create something new. Just like a collage artist does. Take things that are already strengths and mix them up to create something new. I do table reads and records at The Simpsons for Sideshow Bob. Kelsey Grammer is never available for table reads and records. It's his character. He comes in and redoes it in post, but I'm allowed to come in and try to kill Bart Simpson once a year. My pleasure. It's his part, and all credit to him. But Hank Azaria says he owes his entire career to bad impressions. Dan Castellaneta says when he went into audition for Homer, he was trying to do his best Walter Matthau, but it was a lousy impression that came out as Homer Simpson. Because it was a bad impression, it came out as something new. Hank Azaria said his Edward G. Robinson came out as Chief Wiggum. By missing a spot-on impression, they were successful at creating something new. The other thing is take the emphasis off voice and put the emphasis on acting. Get your chops together. Find acting classes and improv classes that speak to you. Not every teacher is right for every student. It has to resonate with you. It has to be the right teacher for you. But improv is crucial to putting you, for animation in particular, in a spontaneous mood and able to listen and respond in the moment. Be less concerned with the voice than with a three-dimensional character. They're not casting funny voices, they're casting fully realized characters. And when they listen back without maybe intentionally knowing, that's what differentiates reads, is commitment to a fully realized character.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
And Michael, can we get the same sort of ruminations about breaking into writing? Because I'm sure there's people interested in that as well.
Well, first of all, you have to write. You can't talk about it, you can't think about it. You have to write, and you have to write every single day. And the most important part of writing is rewriting. But you want to get, if you have an idea for a script, a story that you want to write in a screenplay format, the first thing that's important is get it out of your head and get that first draft done. And don't worry about how long it is, how short it is, whether it's good and you're not, or not good. It's what Flint and I call the slop draft. You just get it out of your head and you get it on a piece of paper. And then you have something to work with and refine after draft after draft.
Yeah, you can't edit a blank page.
No.
All right. We have a question in that fourth row. Yep, you. No, I'm sorry. Yeah, the kid.
Why did you decide to voice act a T-Rex?
It wasn't my decision. It was on the paper, and I just went in, and I'll never forget, there was a schematic, there was a drawing, and it said these words on the top of the page, and I never forgot it. It said, big muscle, small brain. I thought, big muscle, small brain. And so it transforms from a robot to a T-Rex. I thought, big muscle, small brain. Transforms from a big muscle, small brain. Big muscle, small brain. And I looked at his jaw. I thought, his jaw is hinged. His jaw, big muscles, small brain. Meatloaf Cups war stories. Tell Grimlock about petrol rabbits. His jaw, big muscle, small brain. Kind of went like that.
Let's get another one. I see in the back, way in the back. Yep, you.
Which Grimlock line is your favorite?
What's your favorite Grimlock line?
It's a 20-way tie. Me no balls sort of became a catchphrase. There'll be 20 t-shirts at the convention this weekend, and all the lines on them are my favorite. New strategy. They're just all gold. I'm plenty lucky.
In the second row. Oh, we have a mic around it.
Thank you. So here's a quick question. You might have heard a lot. Well, what do you reckon your top 3, maybe top 5 favourite characters you played across your entire life, really?
3 or 5 favorite, characters you said?
Just characters, voices.
Oh, voices, okay.
Simply from longevity, for me, do you have your favorite voices? Or favorite characters that you've written?
Starscream was always my favorite to write.
I don't know.
Because always great lines from him. And then, of course, it was just a joy to watch Chris Latta work.
If Chris Latta hadn't had a creative outlet for his dynamism, his fury, his tornado, he would have found something not creative to do with it. Would have been very not good. But as long as he had a studio and a microphone and a place to put it, he was just a whirlwind, a force of nature. Purely from longevity, because I've been associated with Transformers for 40 years, which means I'm at least 42 years old. But Grimlock and Long Haul, I'd enjoy his outfit to be no dump truck. Remove, so much dirt. And Outback, it was always off to the Outback. But also, the Garfield franchise has been going on for over 3 decades. And I bark and slurp Odie the dog.
And I squeak the mouse, and Garfield eats the lasagna, and I get the cheese. He won't kick me out of the house. We're friends, you know.
And I'm Harry. I'm Harry the alley cat who lives 2 doors down and eats out of the garbage can because food tastes better marinated for a couple of days down there, you know. And Herman the mailman who has to come home before he delivers to the Arbuckle house because that cat. It's just, how do I choose? It's just, and corn-fed, who has to keep the duck out of trouble on Duckman. That's just a given. That's me and Jason Alexander and Dweezil Zappa and Nancy Travis and Tim Curry. Who could ask for anything more? Agent K on the animated Men in Black. The Grumble on Our Real Monsters. I'm tied to so many iconic characters, and I get to go along for the ride. It is Grumble, you're late for class. Sit down, open your monster books. I have all these characters with anger management problems, so I'm not angry at anybody. Anyway, thanks for the question.
And Michael, outside of Transformers, any sort of standout projects that come to mind as you'd be particularly happy with or proud of working on?
You know, on one level, they were all just jobs. And even for the most part, while we had a great time working on G.I. Joe and Transformers, it was still a gig. But one we were grateful for because we weren't out there hustling freelance assignments, we were on staff. But it took a number of years before we realized how lucky we were to be in the right place at the right time, to be working on those shows, because we just never imagined that they would have any kind of longevity. We just assumed within a couple of years it would be canceled, some new bright shiny object would come along and displace Transformers, and they'd be forgotten shortly thereafter.
I need to make a side comment about the writers, because I've traveled and done a lot of shows with Flint Dille also. You keep mentioning Flint. Why wouldn't you? But
He's not here to promote himself.
there you go.
I think we're contractually obligated.
On one level, because I was in G.I. Joe also, in spirit, who says possibility and impossibility are states of mind. In my mind, there is only the possible and that which can be done. They were both Transformers and G.I. Joe on one level, and Flint is the first to talk about it. They were long commercials for toys and toy lines and merchandising and selling of merchandise. But the hiring that went on and the people that they enlisted and the people that they brought on board and the talent that they brought on board, I think it was some magical harmonic convergence. Writers can't be any less wonderful than they are. So when they threw the writing team that they threw into a room together, what they created was nothing less than what they were capable of creating. When they threw us into the booth, we created something that was nothing less than what we were capable of creating. Wally, who was so dedicated to his Bible and his story outline that it drove some people stark raving mad. Look at the longevity of what was created out of this, X factor that nobody had control over, but everybody involved with it was doing their best work with this thing that they were entrusted with. And so what you're left with is a character-driven story that a new generation, a continuing new generation, when they're exposed to it, want desperately to go along for the full ride. That's incredible. Animation is more sophisticated now, but you're not going to find a better story about robots that you care about, who are individually delineated, defined, and different from each other, have three-dimensionalized characters, individualized characters, and I stand by that.
And let me also add that because a lot of us, well, probably all of us, had worked in Saturday morning cartoons where we were constantly reminded we were writing kiddie shows. And so when we were working in Sunbo on both Transformers and G.I. Joe, we did not feel like we were writing kids shows. I mean, obviously, they were
You didn't
kids.
talk down to the audience.
Exactly. We did not write down to the audience. And more importantly, we were, aside from making it up as we were going along, we were trying to not only entertain ourselves and think about, wouldn't it be cool if we did this? But certainly those of us who were on staff in Sunbo, who we all shared office space together, we were trying to entertain each other and get, me trying to write something that would get Flint to laugh or go, oh man, that's a really cool scene. Wish I'd thought of it. And because we had no idea, other than the Nielsen's ratings, we had no idea, and we were always in the top 5 with all the shows we did. We had no idea how the shows were received by the public.
I always thought that you guys were very sophisticated in terms of theme. Just rewatching The Gambler and The Burden Hardest to Bear a couple hours ago.
Fire in the Sky.
Yeah, Fire in the Sky. I mean, you guys are touching on themes of grief and responsibility and, gambling problems. I mean, Smokescreen got himself into that problem in a totally avoidable way, and that's wonderful. So I always, as a kid, I appreciated it in a way I probably couldn't articulate it. Now, as a writer, I look at it and say, you guys, you weren't half-assing it at all. It's great to see.
But at the same time, it wasn't consciously planned. We were just trying to come up with entertaining stories told in an entertaining way that we would enjoy writing, and we would hope, could get the other guys in the office to think it was cool.
That's what I was trying to say. It's because you were who you were. It happened that way.
Sorry, more questions. I'm monopolizing them. We got one in the second row, or third row. And then we'll do one in the back next, okay?
Welcome back, Greg. Lovely to see you. Michael, thanks for coming across to us. I wanted to ask Michael, you've already started to touch on it, so, a lot of us now know how, the sausage is made with TV animation, the showrunners and the writers and the brooms and the networks and the back. But back then, you guys were having fun trying to make each other laugh. So what I was intrigued by is, did you, start having, an idea once you'd seen some of the first shows, what the likes of Greg or Chris Latter or Peter Cullen were doing, or Frank Welker, and did you start to have a real idea for the voice of the characters and want to give them something
that
to do?
played in it too, because as producer of the show, I also supervised the recording sessions and would sit in the booth with Wally on the other side of the glass of Greg and Peter and Frank and all that. And the best part for me, and you correct me if my memory is different than yours, but when I first started doing that, in the morning we had table reads, and but all the actors had were what are called sides that they would get, and basically 8.5 sheet by 11. On the left hand side is a column of the character names, and on the right would be just their dialogue. But Wally would have the actual script. Say it was one of my episodes that I wrote that he could prepare for to help give the actors context. And so in the morning we'd do the table read, and then in the afternoon we'd actually then start recording. And one of my early experiences was, and Greg chime in, it must be commonplace by now, or even then, was to hear an actor come in, look at the sides and go, bullshit, 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 my line, bullshit, 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 my line. And then eventually, and I don't know how long it took, the table reads went away. And some actors, and I won't mention names, although Frank Welker might be one of them, would come in and they'd look at the sides and go, oh man, I only got 6 lines. Wally, I've got another gig over the hill, can you just record me first? And that sort of snowballed into recording the show piecemeal instead of chronologically as the script was written.
That did happen on occasion, but to his credit, part of what drove people crazy was it took a lot for Wally to not insist, to his credit, that everybody in a scene be in the room at the time that the scene was being recorded. His belief correctly. I'm not in the bullshit, 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 my line camp. I don't encourage it. I don't support it. I think it's a sandbox, and everything that happens in the sandbox is contagiously funny or more stupid if it's a comedy, contagiously more urgent and important if it's a galactic war. Whatever it is, it's more if you're all in the sandbox together, if you're all in the same location at the same time. That's gotten impossible with interactive gaming because there's so many eventualities to record for every line, and every way you die 50 ways, depending on how the player plays you. But yeah, it did happen from time to time because of people who have had conflicts. Not for people not asking, but it took a lot to get Wally to not insist that you be in the room for your scene when you were involved in a scene, so that you would interact, not just say your section of the scene. You know, we had means of breaking the ice, and yes, there were people making sign language signs to each other on our side of the glass. There was a camaraderie, and it was there were hints that it was us against them and them against us, and we spent a lot of hours together. And
They were long days.
They were long days, and if Scatman brought his ukulele, nobody was in a hurry to go back. What's the difference? We were bonding. The reason I have friends for life is because of the number of hours that we spent together. So, you know, for me, it's all part of this rich tapestry of memories that I have. Part of the reason the Screen Actors Guild contract changed in regards to animation is because of the number of when we began Transformers and G.I. Joe, the Screen Actors Guild called a session 8 hours, the same as an on-camera session. But so much writing and rewriting and notes from Hasbro and notes on toys and product and rewrites on the fly happened in session that there was a change in the Screen Actors Guild contract that made session times 4 hours rather than 8 hours. In other words, have writers and producers prepared to record at the time of recording and not make them writing sessions as well as recording sessions. So we were actually part of an instrumental change in the Guild contract. Lots of historic things happened at that time. But like I said, if Scatman brought his ukulele, who cares?
Look, I realize we have to take credit for making those sessions slightly longer because most animation studios, for a half-hour show, you're talking about 22 minutes of animation. And most studios were doing 35 to 45 pages of a script. But at Sunbow, we were writing 55 to 65 pages, and everything was recorded, and a lot of times everything was animated, and then after the fact, it was cut for time. So, yeah, we helped contribute to making those days longer.
We have a question in the back. He's been going for a bit.
Hello, nice to see you, Greg. Pleasure to meet you, Michael. Thank you for your amazing work. My question is for you, Greg. Previous question, you were asked about Gridlock, and you summed it up beautifully. So my question to you is, how did it feel after recording a certain episode where suddenly Gridlock was intelligent? How did it make you feel to suddenly portray the character that you've been training for so long in a completely different way?
Grimlock was quite pleased with you. But thankfully, they allowed me to be the possessor of my new brain. And thankfully, me, Grimlock, had the good sense to give it to Computron because I felt more effective as a fighting machine with my old brain. It just speaks to what we're tasked with as actors. I mean, a lot of people bitch and moan and say, I don't want to be funny that way, I don't want to be smart that way, my character wouldn't do that, my character wouldn't do that. I don't do that stuff. I just assume that the script I'm given is my responsibility to make true. So it's just a little challenge that I want to mind meld with the writers and producers and find a way to bring my truth to whatever's on the page and not presume to say I wouldn't say that. I'm being asked to say that. So I try to find a route and re-navigate so that it is true what I've been asked to make true. I make it a challenge. It's kind of a perverse thing I like to do. So I like that arc, and I like that Grimlock, as Grimlock, makes decisions, that he's more effective as a fighting machine without that intelligence. It's just a hindrance to him. Those are actor choices that I made, and I think it serves the piece. But I think it's cool. And because of conventions, I've become so aware of so many of the outside. There's no Disneyland for Transformers, but it's a real virtual space in the cosmos that's had a lot of twists and turns and an unbelievably loyal fan base that have been not only willing but allowing of a lot of latitude. Simon Furman told me about in the book. Some of the books have had Grimlock with great intelligence that he chose to conceal, and that there used to be an Ask Grimlock column at some point way back. Lots of things that I had not known, but I've sort of factored them into my overall understanding of my guy. Anyway, I think it's all interesting. That's how I solved that one particular problem for myself, and didn't consider it a problem at all, just a challenge.
I always enjoyed how Grimlock in season 1 is presented almost as an antagonist for Optimus Prime, and he evolves over the course of the 3 seasons into more of a comic relief character, and yet there's that consistent through line that is provided by you, and it always feels authentically Grimlock. So that was
My work here is fun.
And Michael, I want to talk a little bit about DevCon, just because he hasn't. I'm a little surprised he hasn't come up, but he's definitely a fan favorite character. I want to put you in my shoes. I was 9. It was 1985, and I'm watching the episode, and I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying the character, but I kept wondering, can DevCon actually transform? I mean, I know he can transform in theory, he's a transformer, but are we going to see him transform? Are we going to see him transform? And then, at the end of the episode, right at the climax, really, he does. He transforms into the space fighter, Cesaro gets in, drives away. I was so satisfied as a kid, to see that. It was the Millhouse, when are they going to get to the fireworks factory kind of moment for me. And I'm wondering, as a writer, did you sort of consciously think, I better make him transform, I better pay that off, or was that sort of just a happy accident?
Well, I think because the fact that I created him, and nobody told me that I couldn't create my own Transformers, I did judiciously look through the list of all the Autobots and all the Decepticons, and I didn't find anybody I thought fit the bill for this bounty hunter character that I created. So I thought, well, I'll just make up my own. And again, nobody told me I couldn't. So, but I knew he had to transform, so that wasn't a question. But what didn't occur to me at the time, and again, I was still new to writing animation, and this was my very first Transformers, was that I actually had the power that I didn't use, because I didn't know I had it, to be very specific about how he would look and what he would transform into. And I didn't write any of that. So when I first saw the model sheet, I have to admit, I was disappointed, because I imagined him as somebody a little more terrifying looking, and I felt he looked lame. And I probably wasn't thrilled with his transformation either.
Do you remember what you might have said he turned into? Or how you would, or if you even described it?
I wanted him to be a really overwhelming, in my mind, again, I didn't write any of this, an overwhelming presence. That, because I think I did write a scene where the 2 Decepticons, when they see, oh Christ, it's DevCon, we gotta get out of here. So I certainly implied that he was somebody who they had a history with, and they knew that they didn't want to be sharing the same real estate with them. So I learned from that, and in subsequent scripts, I would be more specific about how I thought a character should look like, or I provided photocopy references of, say, spaceships that I wanted the model artists to factor into their designs.
I think you mentioned when we were chatting earlier, the killing jar?
The killing jar, I did that, yeah.
And I think we have time for one, maybe two questions. We have somebody enthusiastic right in the middle.
Hi, you three.
Hey,
hello.
you made it.
I did. My question's actually for all three of you. What was your favourite cartoon growing up? What was sort of inspired you to get into the television business? Exactly, really. It could be a cartoon, it could be a TV show, anything really.
Looney Tunes in capital letters. Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, and rabbit season. It was, that was me in the living room every Saturday morning with my chin on my fists, and it never got any better. Just that irreverence, all that stuff. It fed me, and when I ended up actually on the young side of my animated career, sitting on a studio stool at Hanna-Barbera next to Mel Blanc, the original voice of Bugs Bunny and Daffy, and thinking that I could die happy that day in the presence of my childhood hero, hopefully able to pay that forward to a younger voice actor in later days. That means the world to me. That is kind of the circle of animated life. Yeah, no, he's my absolute hero growing up, and then there I was in his presence. Doesn't get any better than that.
The animated shows that I remember are also Looney Tunes, but it didn't inspire me to want to be an animation writer. But what I didn't know at the time was that I became a fan of classical music because of Looney Tunes. And I didn't realize that until years later. I was dating this on the late teens, and I'm dating this girl, and her mother, that's all she listened to. And I'd go to the house, pick her up, and I'd hear the music in the background. I go, oh, I know that piece of music. And it didn't occur to me that what we were hearing on Looney Tunes wasn't something that was written specifically for the show, but in fact was the greatest pieces of classical music ever written. And then the other show I remember, again, didn't inspire me, but was my favorite, was Mighty Mouse.
Oh, yeah. And I'm a kid of the '80s. I grew up with Transformers. When I was 8 through 10, it was easily my favorite cartoon. So I found other ones to love as I got older, Gargoyles and Exo Squad. But yeah, those are some good ones. But now I'm a Transformers kiddo. We have time for one quick question. It's gonna have to be quick. We got some over there.
This gentleman's had his hand
Oh,
up
we have one over there.
since the
Okay.
beginning.
Questions have
Yeah,
been
I'm sorry.
great.
You're out of my field of vision. So I'm pointed this way.
Hi, this is a question for all three of you. Like, what's been your favourite episode of any cartoon that you've worked on? Whether it's writing or voice acting, which has been your favourite to work on?
Well, I haven't written any cartoons, so I'll give it to you guys.
What's a specific?
Sorry, is your favorite episode of any cartoon that you've worked on?
Duckman Haunted Society Plumbers. We wanted to be the first name in the yellow pages. So we say, well, Cornfed says, we're the men from Plumbers. She says, let me get this straight. You're the man from It's the first 10 minutes of animation.
I guess for me, it would have to be, and this is not Transformer, it was the first G.I. Joe script I wrote. And it was essentially a Pied Piper story, but within it, I was making fun of heavy metal music. And I wrote the song as well. But I wanted to write a really bad heavy metal song. And it was an epic fail on my part because...
It's a good name for a band.
Epic fail.
Yeah. And so, because the Cold Slither song is every G.I. Joe fan's favorite.
Cold Slither will be joining us soon.
Exactly.
Failed straight to the top.
Yeah.
Failed up. Great answer. Ladies and gentlemen, Michael Charles Hill and Gregg Berger.